Okay, Assalamu alaikum people. I am going to use a couple of slides. I'm going to use a couple of slides to go through skeletal muscle contraction, smooth muscle contraction at lightning speed. Okay, and then we will do the questions, both I downloaded Dr. Sham's questions and the ones that I gave you. Is that okay? And we'll talk about the questions. So let's start off with the slide. Skeletal muscle, there's a muscle fiber. Let me get one of those. There we are. Oh no, I don't want that. No, go away. What am I supposed to do here? Where's end slideshow? Huh? It's a Zoom thing. Okay, there we are. So, and there we go. So, start off with the skeletal muscle. So you have a bundle. Okay, that's one muscle fiber. Inside that muscle fiber, you're going to have one myofibril. That's one myofibril. You then take that myofibril and you look inside it and you have these myofilaments. And you have the actins, the myosin ones and the actins. These are the actins. All right, and the actins are made up of these ball-looking things, and then you have the tropomyosin, and attached to them is the troponin. Now, one last thing before I move off the slide, around each of the myofilaments or group of myofilaments, you have this bluish thing, which is the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And in the middle of the sarcoplasmic reticulum, you have this hole. Can you see this hole here on the top? Yes? It's going in and it's becoming this yellow thing. And that's the T2. All right? So that's what that structure looks like. Now, if you look at that structure as one sarcomere, there's a Z line, there's a Z line, there's my myosin, and so on and so forth. All right? If you look at that structure, you have an overlapping region between actin and myosin. You have a region here where there's only actin, and there's a region here where there's only myosin. Okay? If you look at the cross section of it, notice you have this kind of arrangement for all the actins, and you have the same kind of arrangement here, but now you've got myosin in the middle. Is that okay? Good. So that's the arrangement with the I band and the A band and the God knows whatever else. Okay. What happens to these bands when the skeletal muscle contracts? So there's it totally relaxed. It overlaps a little bit. Okay. And now you got a good contraction. So which bands are changing? The first thing you should notice is A is not changing at all. You got that? Because that is the myosin. You cannot make the myosin smaller. You notice the I gets smaller as you get more and more contracted. Yes? Are we okay? Is there anything that's increasing? How can the A band increase? The A band is myosin, it's standard size. Is there anything that's increasing? Thank you. The overlapping region. Look at the overlapping here, compared to here, and compared to here. The overlapping is increasing. Okay, so to make that muscle contract, I need cross-bridge cycling. All right? And in cross-bridge cycling, so I'll start off at number one. There's number one. There's the Z line, there's the actin, there's the myosin. There's the head of the myosin. At rest, the head of the myosin has attached to it an ADP and a PR, inorganic phosphate. All right? Now, when you have calcium, binds to troponin, tropomyosin moves away. When that happens, this head, can you see this head, will attach to the actin. When it attaches to the actin, all right, then the PI moves away, the ADP moves away from the head or the myosin, and now the myosin will pull the actin. So you're moving the Z line this way. So it's pulling the actin. So it's from a 90 degree, you're going to about a 45 degree. That is what we call the power stroke. Now, once it pulls, the actin, the Z line is going from there to there. Once it pulls in here, it cannot release. I need something to release it from the actin. This is where I need ATP. So the function of ATP is to detach this myosin head away from the actin. All right? When I hydrolyze the ATP into ADP and PI, then I move it back from the 45 degree angle back to the 90 degree angle. Okay? And now I'm ready to contract again. Now this cycle will carry on as long as you have calcium. Okay? As long as there's calcium there, it's just going to keep going through the cross-bridge cycling. All right? Because calcium takes away the inhibition of the tropomyosin away from the actin. All right? So, by the way, these are just my slides. Now, there's that calcium. All right? When you have normal calcium, about 10 to the minus 9 molar in the cell, nothing is going to bind to troponin C. When you increase it to about 10 to the minus 5, okay, that's almost a 10,000 increase in calcium concentration because you're going from minus 9 to minus 5. All right, now actin can bind to troponin, tropomyosin moves away, and now the actin can attach to the head of the myosin. So it has to do with the calcium, all right, not the ATP. The ATP just allows, provided it's there, all it allows is the myosin to detach from the actin. So removal of the calcium causes relaxation, all right? It has nothing to do with the ATP. If there's no ATP, the muscle will be in a contracted state, but not able to recontract, if you understood what I'm getting at. In not able to go through another cross-bridge cycle. And we call that the RIGO state, R-I-G-O-R, okay? So the role of ATP is to overcome the RIGO state. So, you know, if somebody dies and the ATP level just fall because they are dead, the time that the muscle attached and pulled, that's how that muscle will stay in that contracted state. Okay, that's where this word comes about, rigor mortis, after death. It takes quite a while for that thing to relax, but that has nothing to do with ATP. It has to do with the fact that enzymes start to break down that region of the muscle, and then it slowly relaxes. Okay, but for that contraction to take place, I need an action potential. Where do I get that action potential? I get it through excitation-contraction coupling. So there's an alpha motor neuron coming to the surface of a skeletal muscle. When you get an action potential on that alpha motor neuron, you get the entry of calcium. Okay, you can call it a somatic motor neuron. Somatic because it's voluntary. Okay, and then calcium will go in. Calcium will allow those little protein kind of things to attach to the membrane, the synaptobrevin and the synaptotegmen. It will attach to the membrane. When the calcium comes in, it then allows the two membranes to fuse, and whatever is in the vesicle now will end up in the synaptic cleft. Okay. Now, when that acetylcholine, the neurotransmitter, when that acetylcholine diffuses out towards the muscle, it attaches to its receptor, the nicotinic acetylcholine receptor. It opens up a cation channel, okay? And that cation channel, depending upon how many you open up, that cation channel will allow sodium to come in more than potassium to go out. That generates a graded potential in this region. All right, in this region. the end plate. If that graded potential is big enough, by the time you come up here and is beyond the threshold for opening up those voltage-gated channels, now you will have an action potential going through the membrane and down the T-tubule. That action potential going down the T-tubule now will open up, will activate the DHP receptor or the L-type calcium channel. That, in my diagram, has like a little spring in it. Can you see the spring? And that spring will pull on the ryanodine receptor. It's on the next diagram. Will pull on the ryanodine receptor, and then the calcium will come rushing out. So let's move to the next one. There we are. There's the action potential going down. There's the dihydropyridine. You pull, and there's the calcium coming out. Calcium attaches to troponin. There we are. Okay. And you have the cross-bridge cycling going on. There we are. Again, intracellular calcium. Most of the calcium that's responsible for skeletal muscle contraction is intracellular calcium. All right? Not the calcium that's going to go in, the tad bit that will go in through the DHP channel. Again, relaxation. We need to pump that calcium back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum. All right? And the rate at which we pump it back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum will determine the velocity of contraction of a muscle. So if the calcium ATPase, all right, works extremely fast, then the velocity of contraction is also fast. If it works extremely slow, then the velocity of contraction is very slow. All right? So that's what that determines, this one here. Again, the intention is to pump the calcium back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum, take it away from the troponin so that the muscle can go to a relaxed state. Now, when you have contraction of a muscle, so I have an action potential in the motor neuron. There's my action potential. It goes through the neuromuscular junction. I release the calcium. I get a contraction. There's my contraction. I call it a twitch. If the second action potential, so there's the first one, there's the twitch for the first one. If the second action potential is reasonably close to it, so number 1 and number 2, then you add the contraction of the 2 twitches, and the second one is slightly bigger. Now this will make sense because I had calcium released here, and I'm going to get calcium released for this one. So it's like I'm adding the calcium. Therefore, I'm adding the force of contraction. And that's why it goes high. If the 2 action potentials are so close together that I cannot separate the 2 twitches, then I get one nice big contraction that's slightly less than this. Okay? So the way I can increase the force of contraction on a muscle is to increase stimulation coming down the alpha motor neuron. That's one way. I can do that to the point where there's my action potentials, and notice it's getting increasingly, the delay between each action potential is getting increasingly shorter. So this amount, a little bit shorter, even less, and so on and so forth. So when I do that, I get summation. First, I get individual twitches. Then I get summation, and then it becomes flat here on the top. That means the stimulation is at such a rate that the muscle is tetanized. And that is what we call tetany. Okay? It's in a contracted state without any relaxation in between. So increasing the force of contraction by increasing the stimulation in the alpha motor neuron coming to the muscle. All right. The second way I can increase the force of contraction, I can recruit more motor units. So I've got a grayish fiber here, a reddish or brown fiber there. The gray one is supplied by the black motor neuron. The reddish one is supplied by the yellow motor neuron. Are we okay? So let's stimulate each one of them. So I go on the first one, I get this amount of contraction. All right. If I stimulate for both axons, A and B, can you see A and B? Yes? If you stimulate both A and B and they are close together, then there's the contraction for B because these two are close. This is for the first B, this is the second B, and there's the A, which is here. But because all of them are so close to each other, you just add the dotted line, and now you increase the force of contraction by recruiting more motor units. Okay, so rather than just using one of them working, you use all of them working. So two ways you can increase force of contraction. Increase the rate of action potentials down the motor neuron, or recruit more motor units. All right? Okay, now, I want you to listen to me for a minute, and I'm going to explain this diagram for you. So there's an isolated muscle. Can you see the isolated muscle? Yes? And on the top of this thing, we have a force transducer. In other words, a machine that is detecting how much of force there is on the muscle. Is that okay? On the side of the muscle, I have a stimulator. In other words, two wires connected to a battery. Is that okay? Good. At the bottom of the muscle, I have attached a hook and I've got weights. Can you see the weight? Now, follow my reasoning here. There's the muscle. If I put a weight A, whatever the number of the weight is, I put A on it. So I've got the muscle, I put A. What will happen to the muscle? It's going to stretch. It's going to move down. Now, as it moves, as it stretches, because it's connected at two ends, it's stretched. We call that a passive force. That stretching of, I have said nothing about contraction of the muscle. Just putting the weight on it is stretching the muscle. You got that? Good. Why does that muscle stretch? For multiple reasons. There's lots of connective tissue in the muscle. There are elastic fibers in the muscle. And in the body, you have the tendon attached on either end, which is made up of tons of elastic fibers. So if you put a weight on it, it's going to stretch. That's called passive tension. Now, okay, I put A onto the thing. Now what do? I now stimulate the muscle. In other words, I make it contract. Now, common sense will tell us that if the muscle is going to contract, it will start contracting. What must it overcome first? Good, the weight and the stretch. It must overcome the passive tension. You understand? Once it overcomes the passive tension and becomes even more shorter, then it will lift the weight. You got that? What happens if the weight is so big that it's contracting, but it cannot overcome the passive tension? Now, that's an isometric contraction. Okay? If it can, that's an isotonic contraction. So let's come back to the graph. Notice, in an isometric or an isotonic contraction, the first bit is always isometric simply because you're not moving the muscle, you're not moving the weight, sorry. You are actually moving the connective tissue of the muscle. Then you get enough tension, and now it is isotonic. And the same applies when it's relaxing. So it relaxes, and then you get an isometric relaxation here. You follow what's happening here, because that weight is still stretching it when it's relaxing. Okay? Now, this is what this thing would say. So note that the velocity and the degree of shortening depends on the amount of load the muscle has. So if I look at this graph, which has a small load, it has only A. Look at how fast it goes up. Can you see? If I drew a tangent line, it'll be like that. But when I put both A and B, can you see it's gone a little bit like that? Yes? In other words, the velocity is decreased. Okay, the velocity is decreased. Okay, just 1 second, 1 second. So you're keeping that at the back of your mind. All right, so remember, muscle, weight, stretch. Which graph would that be in this diagram? It would be this one. Okay, so you keep increasing the load on the muscle, the passive tension keeps increasing. That's before the contraction, the preload. Now, when you stimulate that muscle, it will contract. This is the active tension, and it keeps increasing up to this point. All right, and when it gets to this point, that's the maximum tension that that particular muscle can generate. Then it starts to decrease. The active tension decreases. And the reason the active tension decreases is because the passive tension is so high that whatever tension it can create doesn't allow it to become any more greater. Okay? And that's what this thing is telling you. Now, the normal length of a muscle is somewhere here, where you would get the maximum active tension. All right? And it is at almost zero passive tension. And in the body, that would be where the muscle is inserted at one end and inserted at the other end of the bone. That will be its resting length. Okay? Now, how is this related to what's happening in the sarcomere? So look, I looked at the whole muscle earlier on. Now I'm looking at a sarcomere. If you looked at the resting length, which works out to about 1.95 to about 2.25 micrometers, you notice you have the best possible overlap between actin and therefore you have the best possible tension. The minute the overlap starts to become too much, you're bringing them too close, your tension will decrease. If you move them too far apart, the actin and the myosin, that means they cannot hold each other and pull in. Therefore, the tension becomes less. Okay, so this is for the whole muscle. This is for the sarcomere. And both of them mirror each other. Okay, at the spot here, which you would consider to be normal muscle length. Okay, velocity. So look at this graph. Okay, so I got a load on a muscle. Now, what do I mean by a load on a muscle? This thing here. Can you see the A, B, C, D? Yes? Yes? Look at A plus B plus C plus D. Am I having any contraction? Yes, I am. Yes, I am. But it's isometric. Okay? The muscle is not moving. All right? The length is not changing in the muscle. Yes, I do have a contraction, but there's so much of a load that there's no change here. It's an isometric contraction. All right? So this is the load that we're talking about, these ABCDs. So go back. There we are. Here, there is no load on the muscle. Nothing. Pure muscle. I stimulate it and I see how fast it contracts. So there's my velocity of contraction, it's up here. That would be my Vmax. Okay? What would this be? When there's too much of weight on it, that the muscle doesn't shorten. It contracts, but it doesn't shorten. That would be what we call the maximum force it can generate. Okay? You can actually go down here if you want, but leave that for the time being. Okay, never mind. So this is where there's absolutely no weight and the maximum velocity of contraction. This would be no no movement or no length change on the muscle because it's now become isometric. Is that okay? Good. Generally, how we ask this question is like this. We will give you 3 or 4 muscles. We'll have a blue one and a red one and a pink one and so on and so forth. And they will all look like this. So you have one that will go down here, there, maybe another one on the top and so on and so forth. And the question would be, what's the difference between the graphs? Now, the way to interpret that is simple. You just look at the y-axis. All right? So if the one is down here at the bottom, just let me switch this pointer thing. So let's draw. No, I don't know where that thing went to. Wait. Oh, there's it here. Okay. So like that. Draw another one like that, and so on. Let's just put one more in here. Can't see the red thing. Shut. You're getting what I'm trying to do here. Okay. So what does it mean about this? In other words, what is affecting the velocity of contraction of the muscle? Does anybody know? Yes, sir. Thank you. Okay, it's the calcium ATPase on the circa, the sarcoplasmic, endoplasmic reticulum, whatever calcium ATPase. So the one at the bottom, which has the least velocity, that ATPase, okay, is working extremely fast, and that's what you need to know. That's how that question is asked. Okay, let's just move ahead. Smooth muscle. Again, I need calcium. Okay, again, I need calcium, but now the calcium essentially comes from outside because you have a high extracellular calcium. Oh, shit. Okay, you have a high extracellular calcium. Extracellular calcium is about 10,000 times greater than inside the cell. So when that action potential goes across the smooth muscle, it opens up voltage-gated channels, okay, and the calcium comes in. That calcium has a purpose. In the skeletal muscle, that little bit of calcium that may have come in or did not come in has no purpose. This one does. What does it do? It brings about the release of calcium from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay, and now you've got the calcium. The calcium binds to calmodulin, which is the same as troponin. Remember troponin in skeletal? Same thing here. That will activate calmodulin. Calmodulin will now activate myosin light chain kinase. Myosin light chain kinase will then go and phosphorylate the myosin head. Okay, and when you have phosphorylation of the myosin head, it will now be able to contract. So, next slide, there we are, the entire thing. Calcium comes in, activates myosin light chain kinase, that will then phosphorylate the myosin head, and now the myosin head will attach to actin and then be able to contract. Is that okay? Yes? No troponin. There's no troponin in smooth muscle. There is a tropomyosin. They don't know what it does. Okay. So it now contracts. All right. Now, how do I make it relax? And it's not as simple as skeletal muscle. All right. Because if I take the calcium and put it back into the sarcoplasmic reticulum kind of thing, the myosin light chain kinase might still work. In other words, I will still get a contraction. All right? So I need another system here. And the other system is this thing called myosin phosphatase, which removes the phosphate from the myosin head, and now the muscle can relax. So I need both things. I need to take the calcium away, but I also need the phosphate to remove the phosphatase to remove the phosphate from the myosin head. Okay? If I still have the calcium, all right? And the phosphate is busy taking out, or the phosphatase is busy taking out the phosphate. Then we have this situation. Oh, sorry, not this, this situation. Where when you have a high phosphatase activity and the calcium is still there, all right, that means the cell is not responsive to the calcium. In other words, it has become sensitized to the calcium. All right, and that's what's being shown here. So low phosphatase activity makes the calcium more sensitive inside the cell. All right, now I just want to go back. Now, when I showed you the first slide on the contraction, I told you I need the extracellular calcium. Remember that? Yes? Good. The calcium came in, bind to calmodulin. I activated myosin light chain kinase. That phosphorylated the myosin light chain. It became a phosphorylated myosin light chain, and I got contraction. Are we okay? Good. How do I get relaxation? I remove the phosphate from here, and now I can get relaxation. Is that okay? And how do I do that? With a phosphatase. So I got a kinase and a phosphatase. However, it's not as simple as that, because I can regulate myosin light chain kinase activity. Okay, remember the calmodulin binding the calcium activated it, but I can regulate it with who? Cyclic AMP. I can regulate it with, or I can regulate the phosphatase with who? Cyclic GMP. So now you can actually regulate a smooth muscle by things like epinephrine or norepinephrine or vasopressin. They will attach to the receptors, activate cyclic AMP, or inhibit using Rho kinase, inhibit a phosphatase. If I inhibit this, it'll keep contracting. You follow what I'm getting at here? It's a lot more involved than that, because you can have all of these other things affecting this simple part. Don't know whether to go up. No, there. That's the simple version, and this will be the complicated version. Okay. I don't think Dr. Shams wants you to know the complicated version. You want to try this question? A skeletal muscle of a mutant experimental mouse shows the ability to contract when the levels of intracellular calcium are completely depleted. From your knowledge of phosphorylation cycling, which of the following proteins is likely mutated in this mouse or mice? Yes? Yeah. A? Why would you say A? No, why do you say A? Thank you. The answer is A. Okay? Because the tropomyosin is not blocking that site on the actin. Okay? Now, just give me a second. Close that. Oh, no, remove the file. Go away. Oh, shucks. All right. Okay, There we are. All right, I sent out a couple of questions with Farah the other day. A 56-year-old woman is diagnosed with systemic lupus erythematosus. I don't know if you know this disease. It's an autoimmune disease. Okay? Presents with muscle weakness, difficulty getting out of a chair and combing her hair. The laboratory result shows she has elevated creatine phosphokinase. That's the enzyme that uses creatine phosphate and turns it into creatine plus ATP. You know what I'm talking about? Good. All right. So there's elevated creatine phosphokinase. She also has an elevated erythrocyte sedimentation rate. That means she has inflammation in her body. Okay. She started on oral prednisone, that is a steroid anti-inflammatory, and referred for physical therapy to improve her muscle strength. There's the question. How does repeated stimulation of the skeletal muscle cause an increase in contractile strength? Of the 88 people who chose the answer, I'm not going to bring the colorful little pie charts, but you know, there were quite a few controversy about this. Anybody want to have a go at this thing? Yes, sir. It's what? D, like for dog. Okay, the answer is actually by increasing the duration of the cross-bridge cycling. Okay, if you increase by isometric contraction, if she increases the duration of the cross-bridge cycling, that will increase the contractile strength of her muscle. Now, increasing the number of muscle myofibrils in a person who already has an inflammation, probably having muscle damage, is not something that's happening at that time. Okay, good. Next question. Let's just go down. Question number 2. A 35-year-old woman presents to the ophthalmologist complaining of drooping eyelids. History reveals she is generally fatigued, weak, and her symptoms improve when she takes a nap, when she relaxes. She's found to have antibodies against nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. In other words, what is this woman suffering from? Myasthenia gravis, okay? A drug is administered that increases the force of contraction, but causes the heart to beat slowly, bradycardia. Okay? What is the most likely mechanism of action of this drug? Yes? Yeah? E increases the amount of acetylcholine release. Really? It's what? It's B. It decreases the metabolic breakdown of acetylcholine, thereby allowing more acetylcholine at the synapse. So the answer is B. In other words, what are you administering to this patient? An acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. Okay, that's what you are inhibiting. What are you giving this particular patient? Next one. Oops. A 16-year-old boy on the track team. 16-year-old boy asks his pediatrician if he can take creatine regularly to increase his muscle strength. Which of the following explains why he wants to do this? I think most of you got this one right. There was a little bit of controversy on this because creatine becomes creatine phosphate, yes? Which is a store of energy inside a muscle cell. And the answer was D, I think. Yes? Good. Next one. Which of the following best describes the contractile response of skeletal muscle? A, thank you. A, an isometric contraction is a lot more stronger than an isotonic contraction. Number 5, Sarah, first-year medical students walk briskly in the hallway to an MSK lecture while eating a Big Mac and fries on the way. Which is the major difference in the contractile response occurring in the smooth versus skeletal muscle? Huh? C, the role of calcium initiating contraction. Okay? All right. Okay, you got smooth muscle, you got skeletal muscle. A couple of minutes ago, I told you about skeletal muscle is intracellular stores of calcium. Smooth muscle, you need extracellular stores of calcium to initiate the contraction, which then brings about the release from inside the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So, the mechanism of force generation in both muscles is pretty much the same. There are a little bit differences between the way the actin and the myosin is arranged, but it's pretty much the same. Actin and myosin go over each other. B, the nature of the contractile proteins, exactly the same myosin and actin in both muscles. There is not a smooth muscle actin. You understand what I'm getting at? They're exactly the same. The source of activator calcium. Now, maybe this should be an answer. Okay? This should be the answer. Thank you for asking. Okay? The role of calcium in initiating contraction, all right, could also be an answer. And I'll tell you why. In the smooth muscle, the calcium is binding calmodulin. In the skeletal muscle, the calcium is binding troponin. Then the source of activated calcium in the smooth muscle, most often than not, it's from outside and then inside. Skeletal muscle, it's only inside. So it could be C and D. The energy source used during contraction for both of them is ATP. There's nothing different in that. Okay. Calmodulin is most likely related structurally to which of the following? It's troponin C. Okay, it's this one. Next one. Okay, tetanic contraction of skeletal muscle. Because you are increasing what inside a cell? It's calcium. Okay, next one. The delay between termination of a transient depolarization. So the green wave is the depolarization. There's the delay down here at the bottom. Okay, that delay, where are we? And the onset of muscle contraction observed in both muscles A and B reflect the time necessary for which of the following events to occur. Yes? C, calcium to accumulate in the sarcoplasm. Okay, next one. Not what? No, it can't be E. Huh? Okay, so you got two muscles, A and B, you stimulating both of them with the green thing. Both of them are taking a little time, okay, a little time before they start to contract. Now, when you have a delay in a muscle, there are two things that cause delay. One is the neuromuscular junction, and the other one is the ability to release the calcium. You know, the ryanodine channel in the skeletal muscle, yes? And then the channel in the smooth muscle. So that's where, so you need to start accumulating that extra calcium. Remember that the calcium is, what was the number? 10 to the minus 9, remember that? You need to bring it down to about a 10 to the minus 5 or up to a 10 to the minus 5. So if you are releasing a little bit of calcium, you might not reach that number. You release a little bit more. You understand what I'm getting at? Okay, where am I? Okay, so that is that delay in making that muscle contract. Okay, so it says ADP to be released from the myosin head. ADP to be released from the myosin head, that has nothing to do with how fast this thing is going to contract. Okay, then ATP to be synthesized. The thing with ATP is ubiquitous. It's always there. Okay, you've got to be dead not to have ATP. You follow what I'm getting at? Okay, again, G actin to polymerize into F actin. Now, those are those little ball-like structures in the actin, which then becomes like a string. Okay, so F stands for filamentous actin, G stands for globular actin. And that is already in the cell. That has nothing to do with, whether you're getting ready to contract. Myosin had to complete one cross-bridge cycle. Okay, now that would have an effect on how fast this thing goes up, not on the delay between the action potential and the force of contraction. So the only answer is the delay in making the calcium to be released from the SR. Question number 9. Smooth muscle contraction is terminated by which of the following? Again, you have two things here: pumping the calcium back in or stimulating the phosphatase. Okay, and the answer is, yeah, it's B, dephosphorylation of the myosin light chain. Phosphorylation of the myosin light chain, or dephosphorylation of myosin light chain by the phosphatase. Next one, oops. Number 10, the sensitivity of smooth muscle contractile apparatus to calcium is known to increase in the steady state under normal conditions. This increase in calcium sensitivity can be attributed to what? To the activity of the phosphatase. So the answer is E. Next one. Let's just move this down. Oops. And now we have a one-page journal. Okay, there we go. So the figure shows the isometric length tension relationship in a muscle, in an intact muscle. That's my passive tension. That's my total tension. Okay, and the active tension will go up there and then come down like that. All right, so question number 1. Which letter on the graph represents the active or the contraction dependent tension? It's A. Which letter on the graph represents the muscle length at which the active tension is maximum? It's E. In other words, the resting length. Okay. Lastly, which letter on the graph is the contribution of muscle connective tissue to the total tension? It's C. This question, 24-year-old woman is admitted to the ER after an accident, and there are lacerations to her left wrist, okay? The tendon got cut. So it says the surgeon went in and he wants to connect them together. Now, he says the cut end of the tendon were overlapped. So the tendon is cut. So what the guy did is he overlapped them like that. One end is on the bone, the other end is on the muscle, yes? Now for him to overlap, what is he doing to the muscle end? He's stretching the muscle end. You understand what I'm getting at? He's stretching the muscle end. So if he's stretching the muscle end, what is he increasing in that muscle? The passive tension. He's increasing the passive tension. Okay? What will happen to the maximum active tension? It will decrease as well. So the passive tension will increase, the maximum active tension will decrease. Why? Yes, when he pulled the thing, the overlap between the actin and the myosin became further apart. So that will decrease. That's what this question is. Now, 1 second, let's just do the question. People want to go home. Okay, I'll take the question in a second. Let's move number 15. There we are. There's the young doctor up there who told us about the ATPase. The figure shows force velocity relationship for an isotonic contraction. Okay, the difference in the three curve results from differences. Obviously, this is a slow one, a medium one, a very fast one. okay, and is due to differences in which of the following due to D? How fast the ATPase, the myosin ATPase, all right, can allow the ATP to come in, hydrolyze it, get onto the next contraction. And that's what this is. And I think that's it. Good luck for your exam, people. But there was a question.
It was B. Question 11. The answer was B. You said question 11.
Close.